Hourya. I want to talk about the neuropsychological research about numbers, arithmetic, and mathematics in general. Here is the abstract you have already. Then I can go further. Neurophysiologic and cognitive experiments have remodeled our knowledge of the cerebral and psychological basis of our ability to estimate, compare, calculate quantities, and solve elementary arithmetic problems. Roughly, I will just, it's a kind of report. The talk is short, and I am going to make short remarks. Roughly, we can distinguish two types of experimentations. The first one is functional neuroimaging, especially functional magnetic resonance imaging, allows to visualize which regions of the brain are activated when a subject performs certain arithmetical or mathematical tasks or any task. We have maps of neural circuits in activation which are correlated with specific arithmetical task activities. But I want to say immediately that correlation is correlation. It does not necessarily mean that the neural activity is the very first origin or cause for understanding numbers or mathematics in general. The second type of experiment is to detect mental operation or representation, cognitive representation of animals, infants, or adults through the observable behavior when somebody is asked to perform some task arithmetically, but not only. Then the reasoning is based on inferences made from what is actually observed to what is putatively represented in the mind. Many different methodologies are used to study the representational structures of the mind. And so, yeah, you have what is the aim of those biological and psychological studies? For answering this question, I just will make two quotes from leading scientists. The first one is extract from Stanislas Dehaene's book. First edition was already in 1997. The second edition is 2011. And he writes, I hope that empirical findings might shed light on ancient philosophical disputes that question the very nature of mathematics. The emphasis is mine. The second quote is taken from Susan Carey's book. My goal here is to demonstrate that the disciplines of cognitive science now have the empirical and theoretical tools to turn age-old philosophical dilemmas into relatively straightforward scientific problems. Carey and Dehaene's aim seems to me similar to Hilbert's aim at solving philosophical or epistemological problems about the foundation of mathematics by mathematical tools. Indeed, searching for neural cognitive foundation for mathematics and more generally for conceptualization or conceptual capacities does matter to those scientists and their colleagues. Mathematics seems to be viewed by them not only as an investigation tool, but really as a right expression of biological and psychological data. But conversely, biology and psychology are supposed to give empirical grounding to thinking and calculating. Indeed, the relative failures of Hilbert's program for the foundation of mathematics did not prevent most neuroscientists and cognitive researchers from searching for foundation of mathematics and assuming two fundamental hypotheses. First, the parallel information processing architecture of the brain, and second, the immanence of arithmetical calculus in nervous activity and mental functions. Yeah, I will give a brief report, taking some excerpts from Stanislas Dehaene and Karin. Naturally, there is very huge number of papers, very huge number of experiments, and so on. It's not, I leave apart, I just take that as type of how these people are reasoning. Dehaene, for instance, maintains that there are biological bases that explain early arithmetical capacity. According to him, numbers are engraved in the architecture of our brain as an outcome of a slower evolution governed by the principle of natural selection. He thinks that arithmetic reasoning captures deeply important properties of the world, which the brain, animal or human, must represent in order to act on them. Then interaction between brain and environment products what I call a post-established and scalable harmony. Not a pre-established, but a post. Yeah, one should just make precise that numerosity, according to Dehaene, not only he, but yeah, as a prototype. The organism's adaptive reactions to the environment have shaped a sixth sense, a really sixth sense, the number sense, which provide animals and humans with a sensory perception of the numerosity of a group of objects. Numerosity is not yet number. It is the approximate quantity of items in a group. According to Dehaene, this number sense gives us the intuition of numbers through the native competence for processing approximate quantities. Numerosity is at the same time an objective property of the world and a brain and cognitive filter to grasp the world. I just give briefly 4 characteristics of the number sense. Not all are there, but they are the main characteristics. The number sense is a fuzzy vision, perception, which extracts numerosity of collection of objects in the world. The number sense handles continuous estimates and judges magnitudes approximately. But it grasps an abstract property of objects or events of the world, namely an order, the order of their magnitude. It needs the help of words and symbols for going beyond estimation and approximation and handling discrete quantities and exact number calculations. In a nutshell, I could say we perceive numerosities and we create numbers. It is generally admitted, that very quick, that it's what is called the intraparietal sulcus of the brain, which houses the circuitry that is fundamentally involved in estimation and comparison of numerosities. And the inferior parietal lobe, the frontal lobe, and regions involved in language processing are active in calculation tasks. naturally, Dehaene and his colleagues suggest that these two regions play complementary roles, and they argue for a down-top continuity between from the primary unconscious intuition of numerosities to the progressive verbal and symbolic construction of numbers. A great number of experiments are made in order to test the hypothesized existence in the animal and human brain of what Dehaene calls the analogical number system. Experimentation shows a link between quantitative and spatial representations. Dehaene and most neurocognitive scientists suggest that this relationship is rooted in the brain's organization, engraved. Yeah, here you have a quote. I am not going to read it because you can read it yourself. I just give a brief moment. According to Dehaene and many others, the spatial numerical association of response code, what is called SNARC, implies that the core semantic representation, fundamental representation of numerical quantity can be linked with the mental number line. That is a great hypothesis from Dehaene, which is a quasi-spatial representation on which numbers are organized by their proximity in the brain. We have a real number line in our brain. The representation is analogical, that means not digital. And yeah, you have a quotation that I shall read. With the approximation system, we have an immediate intuition about the continuity of numbers. Yeah, new just assessment of what Dehaene thinks and writes. And now I pass to some criticism of this view. First, I am borrowing to Rafael Núñez some of this criticism. I must repeat that this was a short talk, that then I am not giving many details. Reasonably, Núñez argues that the number line, although ubiquitous in the modern world, and particularly in the Western world, is not universally spontaneous, but rather it's a product of cultural development. The number line, as well as the mental representation that it entails, emerge outside of natural selection proper, that is direct against Dehaene, requiring the mediation of high-order non-numerical cognitive mechanisms such as fictive motion, conceptual mapping. This is not a lot of things to tell about fictive motion and conceptual mapping, but I shall not do that. Here, now. I am giving a summary of Núñez's main arguments. He remarks that no number line in old Babylonian tablets, and that was apparently John Wallis who was the first to introduce the concept of number line in his treatise of algebra. And as is often remarked, there is in the Descartes geometry no mapping between real numbers and spatial real lines drawn. The next quote seems to me important because he makes a difference between number as adjective and number as noun, as the noun of an object, and not the noun of a property. And I take it for, yeah, in other it's to me important. I mean, it seems to me something new that to take numbers as really object and not uniquely as properties of objects. In fact, as I said, DNA assumes a kind of homology between the physical world and the form and content of our perception of the world. He bases on the continuity of many physical phenomena, including the flow of sensory information and the transmission of nerve impulses, the priority of a continuous, fuzzy, and global perception of numerosities over a discrete and segmented apprehension of isolated unities. He gives priority to the cardinal aspect of numbers over the ordinal aspect, and he gives priority to the geometrical continuum over an algebraic and set theoretical definition of numbers. The problem is that the end takes those facts and acts as generally determined, whereas the clear and explicit notion of mathematical continuity is relatively recent, and the concept of numerical continuity is even more new. How to think the link between a certainly fruitful model and the bare reality? I shall not give an answer to this question here, but it seems to me that one has to keep critical distance between the model used and the reality, whose some, probably not all, aspects are simulated by the model. Two general questions. First, to which extent a high sophisticated numerical model can open the route to the origin of the human numerical ability? And second question, does a model provide even partial grounding, or does it just improve our understanding and suggest means for educational, for training and educational programs? I go now to the second model, which is the Susan Carey's model through object files and object tracking. She is arguing for an alternative model, that the INS, the analogical number system, and she aims at giving not the neural foundation, but the cognitive foundations of concepts, including numerical concepts. She distinguishes two systems. The first one is roughly the Hens number sense, and the second core system is parallel individuation and object tracking, which is, according to her, preferred for representation for small set. She makes useful distinction between format and content of representation. The format of the parallel individuation is iconic, then analogical. but the content may be discrete. Actually, when a small group of objects, 1, 2, 3, at most 4, is presented, we are supposed to extract representation of discrete individuals from the continuous sensorial input. Yeah, it is individuals that we categorize into kinds. It is individuals that we reach for. It is individuals we enumerate. It is individuals among which we represent spatial relations, such as behind and inside and so on. And it is individuals that enter into our representation of causal interaction and event. Here we have a cognitive support for Markov philosophical view on mathematical object, because it seems that we grasp first an object as object and not as one object. The parallel individuation consists in creating in the nonverbal working memory an image of the object presented. This image may be picture, but most time it is a symbol. And when you add a new item in the collection, the representation, the image in the mind opens a new file. We have, for each object in the world, a file. According to Carré, in the object file model, there is no explicit, no direct, no intuitive representation of number. The image of one object, yeah, I said, is first an object image. The image of two objects is first the image of objects of distinct, separated individuals. However, there is an implicit numerical content, and implicit means, according to her, that this content is inferred from the direct perception or representation. I give here 5 characteristics of the representation via object files. Yeah, precise. It is based on principles of individuation and numerical identity. A file, an object file, a file can be empty, and it may code an object without necessarily ascribing features to it. An object is not a bundle of features. Opening a new file provides a mechanism for adding an item to an array of items. According to her, it's a wild precursor of the successor function. And I should say that in her view, the ordinal aspect of numbers comes first. And object files involve the one-to-one correspondence, one file for one object, and that might be the primary route of apprehending the equinumericity of different groups of objects. Yeah, some criticism. Yeah, the sets of mental file objects are clearly taught by analogy with sets of marks such as 1, 2, 3, e.g. k. The underlying model is clearly set theoretical. Like the I-ness of the N, which is based on a more or less visual conception of geometrical continuity, the object file model begs, in my mind, in my view, the question of the origin of our primary arithmetical representation and abilities by using a relative new mathematical theoretical framework for axiomatizing abstract arithmetical concepts. Yeah. Yeah, just one thing. Susan Carr thinks that concepts are mental symbols, and the mental symbols are encapsulated in visions, such that the cognition representation have a conceptual content. Thus, according to her, some form or conceptual thinking or activity, some early form of conceptual activity is present in this sensorial vision. That is naturally disputed. It is not evident that it is so. And the fact that vision is structured, the structuration of vision may be physical structuration. It is not necessarily conceptual structuration. Actually, as to numbers, not concepts in general, but numerical concepts, how do we perform the inference from a perceived object to the thought of one object, or two, or three, or many, and from mental object file to their number? She had many arguments, a whole book of 500 pages, I remember. In my opinion, it's a very hard problem. According to her, the passage happens through bootstrapping, that is Neurath and Quine's concept. Quickly said, bootstrapping is a self-sustaining process that is supposed to allow the passage from empirical data to conceptual construction without external input. But it is not at all clear, at least to me, that a representational system of objects has implicit representations of numbers. Conclusion. I am good in time? Yeah.
4 or 5 minutes.
Yeah. What should I think? It seems to me hard to draw a global and coherent view from the huge number of the fragmented and sometimes not easily compatible results obtained by experimentation. Experimental facts depend, indeed, on the hypothesis one wants to test, on the material condition of the test, on the models used to organize and represent and draw the schema of a set of data, and on the explicit or tacit, and sometimes not very cautious, assumption one admits. Moreover, it is striking that one and the same experiment result may be interpreted in different ways. That is to say that the theoretical meaning of experimental result is not something intrinsically obvious. Most time, justifications are partial and they are never totally indisputable, surely. This is a good reason, it seems to me, to question the idea of ground as it is used by those scientists, and perhaps to make a distinction between justification and explanation on the one hand and ground on the other hand. For give substance to such a distinction, much further job must be done. Thank you.